Morning. We stand up here with a range of emotions. I think the first emotion is disappointment. Disappointment that we're not practicing this week for the Green Bay Packers, that we didn't achieve our goals that we set out when we opened training camp. And I think when you have a disappointing season, it's not just on the players and the coaches. It's also on the front office. And that starts with me. And I'm sorry to our fans. They give us tremendous support. I think the second part is a tremendous sense of pride. Pride in our coaching staff, pride in our players. Because we sat up here about 4 years ago and introduced Coach Pederson, and we talked about building a team that could sustain success, that could be resilient. And I think we've seen that from our team. You know, if I told you 4 years ago that we'd have 42 wins, including playoff games, a Super Bowl title, that doesn't mean that we've accomplished our goals, but we're proud of that. We have a lot to do going forward. When we look at our team from 2017 to 2019, we knew that we had one team, really a team that we were going to basically stick with. We didn't have a lot of resources in terms of draft picks. That's on me. We made trades for some veteran players to go win. We stick to that. We're glad of those decisions. But going forward, we need to infuse youth in this team. We have 10 draft picks. We think we're going to have 10 draft picks in this draft. We're excited about that. When we look at what the young players did for our team down the stretch, it's a great tribute to them. It's a great tribute to our coaching staff. It's a great tribute to our developmental program that we take a lot of pride in. I think the last part is that we need to look at everything. We need to look at everything. We've started that process during the season. As a front office, we have that ability to do that while the coaches are preparing for games. One of the things that obviously has been an issue for us has been the injury situation. When we look at the last 3 years, in 2017, we were able to overcome it. The last 2 years, the injuries have really hurt our football team. Now, there is a part of that that is natural during the game. Injuries are going to happen. But we have to figure out a way to get better here. We can help from a front office perspective by looking at the players that we bring in. Hope is not a strategy when it comes to injuries. When you bring in guys that are injured, it obviously increases the risk that they'll get hurt again. We've hired a new chief medical officer. This is someone that we're very, very excited to have. He came in June, and what he asked for us was that he would observe through the season, observe our training staff, observe our weight staff, our sports science, our processes, and make recommendations to us that we would carry out. So we're excited about that. That's all I got.
Howie, what is your assessment of the wide receiver position heading into this offseason, and can you explain the decision to guarantee Alshon Jeffrey's contract for 2020?
Yeah, I think the first part about it is that we are going to sit down and meet with our coaching staff, with our personnel staff over the coming days, the coming weeks, and we're going to evaluate our football team. We have not done that yet. Obviously, the last couple of days have been difficult with end-of-season meetings and talking to people and our players. And, you know, when we look at who we started the season with and our starting three receivers, obviously they weren't out there in the playoffs. So we got to look at that. We got to look at every position, and we got to look to improve at every position. And we got to get with Coach and his staff and make sure that we're finding the players and the position requirements that they're looking for as well. In terms of Alshon, we had a conversation with Alshon before the season, and he took a pay cut in exchange for guaranteeing. For us, we were trying to create as much flexibility going forward with our roster to create cap space to improve the football team. You know, I think we forget some of the contributions to our team that Alshon has had. You know, during our Super Bowl year, the injury he played with, not missing a game, and the contributions in that Super Bowl game. You know, last year he had 11 catches during the playoffs. I mean, even you look at this year, in his last game, he had, I think, 8 catches for over 130 yards in the Miami game. So, you know, Alshon is a talented player, and you know, he loves being an Eagle. He loves this city. I think about the moment last year after the New Orleans game when he went into that school and put himself out there. So, I guess that's my comment on that.
Howie, over here. What was the process that led to you guys drafting J.J. Arcega-Whiteside ahead of DK Metcalf and other wide receivers that were available?
Yeah, you know, J.J. is a talented kid. He's got tools in his body. He had production I think back to after the Baltimore preseason game, and it's funny because myself and some members of our personnel staff got some calls from people around the league that maybe he was going to be the rookie of the year. And so that doesn't mean that he doesn't have to take a jump, because he does. This offseason is really important for him. I don't think we saw the best of JJ. He was affected a little by injuries. At the same token, there have been some successful receivers from this draft class, and we don't have our head in the sand and not notice that and go back and kind of look at that. I think when we look at it, the most surprising thing for us, as we've kind of studied this and the things that are important, was there are 3 rookie receivers who never had more than 40 catches in a college season, who've been tremendously productive this year. So is that a factor for us when we look at college production and we kind of see how important that is to us? Do we got to go back and look at that? And I think we do.
Just to follow up real quickly, was DK on your draft board, and was he rated ahead of JJ?
I would say this. I don't want to get into where guys were. We take a lot of factors into account, not just talking about DK, whether it's medical, whether it's character, whether it's production, whether it's fit. And listen, there are a lot of guys who are going to be drafted later than we pick that are end up being good players. We're trying to not have many of them, but I think that the big thing for us is, because we haven't had a large number of picks, we have to hit on more of them. And volume's important to us going forward. Nobody in the draft, I think, we look at all the teams that are still playing now. They have missed on picks, high picks. Everyone's going to miss on them. We don't want to. But you have to increase your volume to give yourself a better shot.
This question is actually for Doug. Doug, now that the season's over, how do you assess the job of Mike Groh and Carson Walsh, and do you expect them to be on your staff next year?
I think both of those guys did an outstanding job for me this year. There was a lot of things we faced offensively, as you know, through adversity, through injury, through many different, I think, facets of trying to get the pieces together. And so my hat goes off to both of those gentlemen because of the game plans that Mike and I and the offensive staff put together, first of all. And then here towards the end of the season, Carson Walsh having a big impact on getting these young players ready to go, to play, and to play at a high level. That's not easy. That's not easy for guys to basically come off our practice roster who were, within weeks of being on our roster, or being on the practice squad, to be elevated to game status. It's not easy to do. And these two gentlemen did an outstanding job for me, for the team, and really put us in a position to, be in the postseason here at the end of the year. Yes, both of those guys will be back.
This question's for Howie. Sorry, Doug. You mentioned, that you guys needed an infusion of youth, with the draft coming up and everything. But you've also signed a bunch of veterans who may or may not be back. I mean, guys like Malcolm, Nigel, Jason Peters, and stuff like that. I mean, how do you balance that as far as, having a veteran presence, but also, needing to reevaluate with youth and everything? And how difficult are some of those decisions going to be, specifically Peters and Malcolm, et cetera?
Yeah, it's very difficult when you have guys who've given their heart and soul to this organization, their team, to this team, who you've developed personal relationships, to say goodbye. And I'm not talking about those guys in general. I'm just talking about that decision. But at the same time, you also need veteran leadership on your football team. You need guys who've been through it. I think that you saw that for us at the end of the year. There are guys who have been through the adversity and who are able to overcome it and be able to take our young players and lead them and tell them that kind of the expectations that they had. And so you try to balance all those things. Now, we haven't gotten into the evaluation of any of this. We haven't decided on our plan going forward. Those are all the things that will happen in the coming days and coming weeks.
Jimmy? In each of the last 2 years, you made trade deadline deals last year for Golden Tate and this year for Jannard Avery. Both players, were, I guess the coaching staff had difficulty implementing them into the game plan. How much communication goes on between you and the coaching staff when those deals are made, and is that something that you'll look at going forward?
Yeah, we have a tremendous communication with our coaching staff. I mean, Coach and I probably talk 5 or 6 times a day about everything. There's no move that we make that isn't with a plan for the player going forward and isn't with a sign-off. I mean, it wouldn't be very smart of us to bring a player in and just say, we're bringing this player in because we like them, and you guys have no say. You know, that's not how we do anything. I think they're two different examples. I think Golden was more of a win-now kind of move. When we acquired Gennard, we knew that to get the best of him would take an off-season. He obviously had 2.5 years left on his contract. He was someone that we thought was a young player who had explosive traits. And when we talked to coach and the defensive coaching staff, they said this trade will pay off more in the future than it will through the course of the year. And so we understood that. We understood that it was a high price to pay, but it's hard to find guys with his skill set, and he's a versatile guy, but he'll be best served with an offseason.
Howie, what have you identified so far about things that need to be modified in terms of off-season approach, given the results of this season?
Yeah, I think that we got to study everything, and we do get a head start on that. I think one of the things, again, is just having the opportunity to have a little bit more resources in terms of draft picks than we've had in the past. And, you know, not only does that give you a better chance of hitting on guys, but it also gives you more flexibility. So I'd say in the past couple of years, obviously we moved up for Andre, and once you do that, it's hard to move up and down the board to kind of go target guys because you don't have the resources to do that. And I think we look at that and we know that. The same token, we'll continue to study and try to figure out ways to get better. And you know, we're excited for the opportunity to do that. You know, we owe it to our fans, we owe it to this organization and Mr. Lurie.
This question is for Howie and Doug. What is the hierarchy for decision-making when it comes to promoting guys off the practice squad? For example, if someone's outperforming a player in a regular season, how do you arrive at that decision?
Well, I think, and Coach can add to that, you know, from our perspective, we want to make sure the coaches have whoever they need on game day. You know, the 46-man roster, really, we want to make sure that it's the coaches and that gives them the best chance to win. And sometimes it's not as simple, and we talked about a little, I think Ruben asked this question in training camp about a guy like Greg Ward. And, you know, sometimes you're trying to figure out if the guy's not a starter, what's the role on special teams? You know, how can you complete your special teams? How can you make sure you have enough guys out there that are doing that? And so those are the conversations. I mean, everything that is done for the Philadelphia Eagles, we are talking about. This is a collaborative process for all of us. We are talking about things all the time. You know, probably in Coach's mind a little too much during the season as he's trying to game plan for things, but that's how we roll.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the practice squad and really you're active when you're talking about a game day roster, and we start talking about that on Monday after a game. You know, we take a lot of factors into consideration, obviously. I mean, injuries coming out of Sunday's game is probably the biggest thing that we look at. Obviously, performance, you know, whatever it can be. And then we make a, because Howie said, we make a decision that is number one is best for the team. And a lot of times it to be able to bring guys out of off of the practice roster, it may not be at that position. It might be another position on your team that you need somewhere else. And so it's not always conducive to, you know, if it's the receiver you're trying to get up, maybe it's not him. Maybe you got to, you know, bring a defensive tackle up, which we've had to do, or a defensive back at times or something like that. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, but we really sit down on Monday and really start putting those pieces together so we can have the guys we need going into the next ball game.
Yeah, for Howie. Howie, looking back on the season now, how would you evaluate your individual performance in terms of how this team was assembled, one of the older rosters in the league in a game that's constantly getting younger?
Well, first of all, it wasn't good enough, Gunn. You know, I mean, we're not playing right now, and that wasn't our goal. That wasn't our expectation. And I will do a better job. I will do whatever I have to make sure that I do a better job and that we continue to make good decisions. That being said, because of the resources we had the last couple of years, we were trying to find what were the undervalued markets. And so when you talk about the older guys, you know, when you go into free agency, a lot of times the guys that are 26 and 27, kind of what we did in 16 with Brandon and Rodney, those guys are getting top of the market. And so we were trying to figure out ways we can improve this team and bring in some of those guys. And, for us, when we look at it, Malik Jackson was a big loss for us. Malik Jackson was a big loss. This is a guy who didn't miss a game in 8 years, and then 30 some odd plays into his Eagles career was down, and that was a guy we were really excited about. And so some of the moves we made in the offseason I kind of distinguished from the moves that we made in August, where we brought in some guys, and what we were trying to do in August was just increase our depth so that if we had injuries, we had guys who had experience in our system. They weren't really free agent signings. They were kind of looking at a short list and saying, hey, this guy may be the last at the position, and if we need a guy in September or October, he'll know the system, we'll be able to bring him back. And obviously, a couple of those moves didn't work out either.
Howie, when you look at the surrounding Carson with the weapons he needs to kind of be successful, from a speed athleticism standpoint, how do you view kind of the state of the roster, and is that an area that you see kind of need to upgrade here in the offseason?
Well, you're always looking to get faster. You're always looking to get more explosive. I think that's always been something that's been fun for us to try to do. And when we looked at last year and where we were and adding Deshaun, and when we get all these, and I know Jeffrey's talked about some of the data we look at and the GPS numbers, Nelson Aguilar is one of the top 10 fastest receivers in the league, and so we felt with adding Deshaun and Nelly, and Miles is an explosive player. Our tight ends are an explosive group. When we looked at it, we felt like we had some speed on the field. Now, obviously, that didn't work out the exact way that we were hoping for, and so for us, it's an important thing to do. Obviously, Carson's got the ability to make all of the throws, and we don't want to take that out of our arsenal. So without kind of going through the answers to the test, it's something that it's always been important to us in building the team.
Hey, Howie, Jim Schwartz is interviewing in Detroit today. He has a year left on his deal here. What's your attitude toward that? And if he were to get an offer to go there in a non-head coaching capacity, how would you treat that?
Are you breaking news on this Jim Schwartz to Detroit?
It's Cleveland. Oh, I'm sorry, Cleveland.
Yeah.
One of those cities that's in the industrial north. It's
coach would be best served talking about his coaching staff.
What was the question?
Jim Schwartz, Cleveland. Garrett Howie was out.
Obviously, I love the fact that guys around the league and teams around the league are looking to my staff for possible head coaching candidates. I think Frank Reich a couple years ago, and now Jim's obviously been a former head coach, and I think he would make a tremendous head coach again, and his leadership and obviously what he has brought to me, and how I've been able to lean on him through his experiences as a former head coach. And Jim's done an outstanding job with our defense, obviously, and the improvement that we saw throughout the course of this season. So I'm excited for him and his opportunity, and wish him the best.
Is he coming back?
He'll be on a plane back here at some point after the interview.
If he doesn't get a job.
Oh yeah, part of the evaluation process and all that. I would assume yes.
But you said you had.
Yeah, Jim he's currently my DC. Yeah.
Not going.
This question is for Howie.
He's coming back on a plane. He's coming back. We got meetings.
Howie, you touched on this earlier, but in the offseason, bringing back so many veterans, your Jason Peters, your Darren Sproles, your Deshaun Jackson, what was your reaction and the lessons that you can take seeing how young this team had to go? And you talk about the youth that needs to be instilled into this team now.
Yeah, it's a great lesson. I think that you have to let young players play, and it's natural for us to want to have a safety net at every position. And we have to allow these young players to grow and get some experience, and just the energy they injected into the team, and obviously the production that they had. So we have to balance that. Again, some of those guys, like you talk about Darren Sproles, and for us, our decision to bring back Darren was one. We had some early games on the road in Atlanta and Green Bay where we thought that it would really help this football team to have a veteran returner. You know, we've been in experiences before where we went into hostile environments and maybe had a young player returning punts, and we had tremendous faith in Darren. And we also felt like what Darren could do for Miles in Boston, what Darren did do for Miles in Boston, I mean, those guys for the rest of their careers will be affected by Darren Sproles being on this team, seeing how he prepares for games, seeing his work ethic. And so, you know, there's value to having veteran players on the team that's bigger than just their on-field contributions.
Yeah, Howie, this is actually for both of you, but the backup quarterback, it's, you know, it seemed like for the longest time you guys were really high on Nate, and then all of a sudden when he got hurt, he's the number 3. What went into that? And the second part to that is, you know, if he's not here next year, which obviously he's on an expiring contract, and so is Josh, what are your thoughts on Kyle Lauletta and anybody else that you might have to bring in?
Yeah, the first part I'll let Coach answer. I think the second part about it is Kyle had the opportunity to learn our system, to really grow this year. Watch great. That room is made up of great professionals, and I think for him it will help his development and his growth, and he'll have an opportunity here in the offseason and next year in the preseason to get some experience and to show where that led off. You're going to have to have him repeat the question, aren't you?
No, this is the easy one. First of all, I appreciate everything that Josh McCown did and brought to this team, this organization. His mentoring with Carson, I think, was second to none, obviously, because sometimes you have relationships where, you know, the coach-player relationship is different than player-to-player relationship, and I think he and Carson really had a tremendous relationship all season and really helped him perform at a high level. Nate, it was unfortunate, obviously, the injury that happened at the end of camp. Felt like Nate was kind of poised and ready to be the number 2, you know, here for us, and we'll see what happens, you know, this offseason, obviously, with him and with Kyle. You know, we get a chance to work with him, you know, this offseason and see what he can do. But you know, first, it was a great group. It was a great room, and they did an outstanding job this year for us.
Howie, at the trade deadline, you saw young high-profile players traded at position that I imagine you consider short-term and long-term needs. I'm talking about Ramsey and Fitzpatrick. How would you characterize your level of aggressiveness, and why weren't you more aggressive?
Well, I would say to our fans, our organization, I'm always aggressive, and at the same time, in calm times, you have to set a level that you're comfortable with. There's a lot of factors that go into trades, including for the other team, them trying to project what the team they're trading with is getting. So if you have the same offer from 2 people and you think one team going forward may have a different record than the other, that's going to factor into the equation. And we weren't trying to sit on our hands on either of those 2 things, but you also have to be prepared to walk away. And you know, we think going forward, we have a lot of players on this team that we're excited about that are high-priced players, and so we have to supplement them. And we want to sustain success. We do not want to be, you know, kind of this up and down roller coaster ride. We want to give ourselves a chance every year in the playoffs, and so it's hard to give up that many resources. And we gave away a lot in the last 3 years. You know, you think about it when we came here and the trade we made for the quarterback, and we had made a trade for a quarterback before, and you know, obviously in 2017 we made a couple trades for draft picks. So we were trying to be measured. I mean, you're talking about really good players, so it would be silly for us not to get involved in those discussions. But there also has to be a walkaway number.
I have one for you, but first, just to clarify on Jeff's question, he asked you about Mike Rowe, and you said he'll be back. I want him back. He asked you about Jim Schwartz. You were a little more vague. Just to clarify, if he doesn't get the Browns job or another job, do you want Jim back as your D coordinator?
Yeah, and listen, I'm with all my staff guys. I mean, I'm in that process right now of evaluating, and would love to have them all back, obviously. We know what this league is about. And anytime an assistant coach can get a promotion, whether it's here or somewhere else, I encourage that. But, you know, as I evaluate and look, I mean, we're only 3 days removed from the season, so everything's still fresh on my mind too. So we're still evaluating, and all my coaches are in that evaluation process as well.
So when you say Grow and Walsh are coming back,
I mean, listen, I know what I said, okay? And yes, but at the same time, I'm still evaluating the whole process, right? They are still currently here. And I'm going to continue to evaluate, and assemble the best staff moving forward. But currently, yes, they're still here.
Can I just follow up with one for Howie? Just the current state of the cornerback. Obviously, Darby and Jalen are free agents.
Are you done?
I'm done with you.
Okay.
Get out of here. Yeah,
I wasn't going to push him out of the way. I mean,
Jalen and Darby are free agents. Rasul and Sidney didn't play a defensive snap Sunday. How do you see that position moving forward?
well, I'd go to the stock answer of we got to try to improve this team. I know, again, like I'm not trying to stick my head in the sand. I know there are a couple of positions here that are a focal point, and I understand the reason for that. And I think that we got to get with our staff and decide kind of what we're going to do going forward, but also look at any way we possibly can improve the team. And that's an important position. You see it. It's when you have a guy who can really kind of take over and take one side of the field, but those guys are hard to find. They don't kind of grow on trees, My favorite joke here is that I can't go out of the NovaCare complex and just like pick one off a branch, But we'll evaluate all that. And when you talk about some of these young players, they also got some great experience, and proud of them and the way they competed. And talk a guy like Sidney, a guy that really had so much adversity in his first couple of years and came in at the end of the season and really played well. Rasul, a guy who's tremendously competitive. So we'll just see going forward.
I mean, they didn't play a snap Sunday, so there's something going on there. That's all. That's why I'm asking. You drafted them in the second, third round 2 years ago, and they couldn't get on the field Sunday. That's why I'm specifically answering.
Yeah, and I answered to the extent that I felt was appropriate.
Howie, Malcolm Jenkins told us on Monday that he didn't want to come back unless he had a new deal. Do you plan on sitting down and working on a different contract with him?
We're not going to talk about contracts with any players, but it's important to us that we have discussions with our players and communicate with them. We obviously understood that where Malcolm was when it came to training camp and the conversations we have. What an incredible Eagle, what an incredible player, what an incredible person he is and has been for us. And but after that, obviously we'll just kind of keep those conversations between us.
A question for both of you on the tight end position. Zach on Monday kind of expressed some surprising uncertainty about whether he'd be back. Is there any doubt about that? And he's got 2 years left on his contract. He's obviously going to cost a lot of money when he does sign a new contract with you or someone else. You've also got Dallas, who's emerging as a top tight end in this league. Can you afford to pay two tight ends top-tier money? And Doug, are you committed to playing 12 personnel long term?
Yes. No, I think that from our perspective, I think just talking to Zach over the last couple of days, Zach's got 2 years left on his contract. He's a guy that's had a tremendous career. He's got a chance to not only go in the Eagles Hall of Fame, but really the NFL Hall of Fame. And I think our goal is to keep our homegrown players here. And I don't think I don't want to put words in his mouth, but just having conversation, I don't think it was meant to be reflected about concern about his immediate future. And going forward, part of the reason that we talk about trying to have more draft picks and young players is to keep our young players that are really good, like Dallas. So we'll go through that and the planning part of that going forward, but obviously a really good young player.
Time for 3 more questions.
Okay.
We're going to go Ed,
Let me just
Bo,
follow up.
and
My
then
question
Howie.
was a little vague, I guess. 12 personnel. Obviously, it creates some, as we game plan, obviously, 12 has been a productive personnel group for us. There are times on third down where you probably want to be a little more 11, put a little more speed out on the field, things of that nature. But again, as we went through the season and dealt with the amount of injuries that we had, we felt as a staff offensively that our best was 12, and having both Zach and Dallas on the field at the same time. So moving forward, I think that's a starting point for us, obviously. But we do know that We'd love to have 11 personnel. We'd love to have 10 personnel. We'd love to have, 13 personnel with 3 tight ends. I mean, we play that quite a bit. So, but 12 is a big part of our offense.
For both of you, it's been 3 days since you saw that hit on Carson Wentz. I just wondered, what your view of that is now. Was that a legal hit in your opinion? Have you expressed anything to the league? Have you heard from the league? And do you think Carson gets the same amount of respect as some of the other quarterbacks in this league at his stage in his career?
I mentioned to you after the game, obviously, my comments on when I saw it, but then when I saw it again on Monday, it's unfortunate. Did I feel like it was potentially an illegal hit? It's possible, but listen, it's part of our game. It happens. It gets missed. It's unfortunate for Carson. I'm disappointed for Carson that he obviously couldn't finish, that postseason game. Unfortunate for our team, but I'm not going to focus on the past. I'm moving forward right now. I'm not going to dwell on, one hit, one play. So that's that.
But do you think he gets the respect that some other quarterbacks get at this stage of his career?
I do. Listen, all mobile quarterbacks, they become runners at some point, and that's just that's kind of the give and take with these guys. And we've encouraged Carson to use his legs when he can, and that particular time it was a broken play, and he was making a play. And again, it was unfortunate the hit, but I do think that once they become runners, it becomes different. That's just the way the league is.
How's he doing, Doug?
He's great. He's great. Spoke to him last night. He was here. I'll see him again today, and he's doing extremely well. Yeah. I don't know. You have to clear the protocol, obviously, but with all indications, I think he'd be ready. Yeah.
We'll do Bo and Dave, and then please don't yell out other questions.
Sorry. Go ahead, Bo.
For Howie. Do you believe that there is a correlation between the spate of injuries over the last couple of years and the age of the roster?
I think that when you talk about the chance of getting hurt, the older you get, the higher chance you have of getting hurt. So I definitely think that that's a factor in the injuries. I mean, my body doesn't feel the same way that it did, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. So, the simple answer is yes.
Howie, with Malcolm saying what he did Monday, does a public statement like that affect the way negotiations for a contract work? And how do you approach this offseason with him, knowing that?
With him?
Yeah.
I think that we have honest communication with all our players. We talked to so many, Coach and I, over the last couple of days, and we talked to so many during the season, and so none of this is a surprise. This isn't like it's coming out of left field and that we don't understand what they're feeling and what they're doing. And I understand. I understand all of our players. All of our players are trying to do what's best for their family and trying to get as much as they can. It's a short shelf life in the National Football League, so there's no hard feelings at all.
Can I just ask a question that fans have been asking me to ask you guys? Do either you, whether it's the coaching staff or the personnel staff, feel like you should bring in a senior evaluator or someone on the offensive side to come in and look at the team and bring a different perspective to that process?
For the personnel staff?
For personnel and for
So
Howie
on the personnel staff, we have that. We have Tom Donahoe, who's been a GM for a long time. I would say our front office, I say this, I'm extremely prideful in our front office. I think we have a great front office. We lost, obviously, a GM candidate in Joe Douglas. We have a very talented front office staff. We're going to make some additions here in the next couple of days, which we'll announce, too, that we're excited about. And we try to have different perspectives. We try to have different perspectives, just objective and subjective, so that we're not getting married. Because I know for me personally, one of my weaknesses is getting attached to our players. There's no doubt about it. So we have a lot of voices who are not afraid to air their opinion. And, I think that, we always want that. And obviously we have the coaching staff, too, who gives us their opinions as well. So.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Offensively, senior, bringing anybody else to look at the offense?
In what capacity?
Thought about that, bringing in someone?
I don't understand. What capacity?
Well,
Just
I mean,
to look at the.
I remember Andy did it with bringing in Marty Morningweg, and we've seen other coaches do it in
Wasn't Marty a coordinator or a coach here? Did he bring him in again? It was after I gone. Was I let?
I think before he
Before.
brought him in after he left the Lions, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, my point is,
Maybe.
like, are you looking to bring in somebody else to look at the offense?
Get my water.
Everything's obviously on the table. Yeah, I'm not opposed to doing something like that. I've actually thought, even in my first year, as a rookie head coach, to maybe bring in someone that has, obviously, just a different perspective, different eyes, I guess. Not coaching a position, whatever. But those are things that I continue to look at.
And Coach, you did that on the defensive side.
I did it. Yeah, I did it this past year with Matt Burke. Stuff like that, and I trust myself. I trust Howie and his team and my offensive staff. We got enough.
Okay.
Oh.
Thanks, guys.
Sorry, Brett.